A shark the length of a school bus, teeth the size of your hand, a bite force stronger than any creature that ever lived on this planet. Every ocean it entered, it owned. Every animal it approached, fled. We have always called Megalodon the perfect killer, the unchallenged ruler, the thing at the top of everything. But what if that picture is wrong? We will look at the ancient predators that drew Megalodon's blood, the hunts that failed, and the creatures that may have made even this monster hesitate. If you enjoy the journey, subscribe so you never miss one. Brace yourself, we begin. Picture the biggest school bus you have ever seen. Now add another 10 feet to the front. That is roughly how long Megalodon was. 60 feet of muscle, cartilage and hunger, moving through ancient oceans with a body so massive it blocked out sunlight from below. Scientists did not find a complete Megalodon skeleton. Sharks are made mostly of cartilage, and cartilage does not fossilize well. What we have are teeth, thousands of them, some as long as 7 inches, which is bigger than an adult human hand from wrist to fingertip. From those teeth, and from a handful of fossilized vertebrae, researchers built their size estimates the same way a detective reconstructs a crime scene, carefully, piece by piece. Here is how they did it. Great white sharks have a reliable ratio between their tooth size and their body length. Scientists applied that same ratio to Megalodon's teeth. Every measurement pointed to the same answer. This animal was roughly 3 times longer than the largest great white shark ever recorded. 3 times longer means much more than 3 times heavier. A body scaled up like that carries weight that multiplies fast. The best estimates put Megalodon somewhere between 50 and 100 tons. The higher end of that range is heavier than a fully loaded semi-truck with 2 trailers attached. Now think about what it means to move that weight through water. A creature that size does not chase prey the way a cheetah sprints after a gazelle. Speed costs energy. At Megalodon's size, energy was everything, so the body was built for efficiency. Broad, powerful tail fin, thick torso packed with muscle, a head designed not for agility but for force. Every part of this animal was engineered around one idea: close the gap, strike once, end it. The teeth themselves were serrated like a steak knife, but on a scale that seems unreal. Each edge carried dozens of tiny ridges that tore through flesh and bone the way a saw moves through wood. When Megalodon bit down, it did not just puncture, it removed. Scientists studying bite marks on fossilized whale bones found entire sections of rib cage simply gone, sheared off in a single pass, and the jaw. Researchers estimate Megalodon's jaw stretched wide enough to swallow 2 adult humans side by side. That is not a metaphor built to scare you. It is a structural measurement based on tooth spacing and jawbone fragments. The opening was roughly 11 feet across. Stand in most living rooms and you can almost touch both walls. That is the mouth. What makes all of this stranger is how recently Megalodon was alive. This animal was not some ancient distant creature from the age of dinosaurs. Dinosaurs vanished around 66 million years ago. Megalodon was still here just 3.6 million years ago. Modern humans showed up roughly 300,000 years ago. If you compressed all of history into a single year, Megalodon and humans would have been alive in the same final week. That closeness in time is what makes the next question so urgent. A body this big, this powerful, this recent. Did anything in that ocean actually scare it? The answer starts with what Megalodon chose to eat, and more importantly, what it sometimes chose to avoid. Megalodon was a predator, but it was also a strategist. And the things a predator chooses to hunt tell you almost everything about the things it chooses to avoid. For most of its existence, Megalodon's primary food source was large marine mammals, whales, ancient dolphins, prehistoric sea cows. These animals were slow enough to catch, fat enough to provide real energy, and common enough to keep a 60-foot shark fed. Scientists know this because the evidence is written in bone. Fossilized whale ribs and vertebrae from the same geological periods as Megalodon carry identical marks, deep parallel gouges that match Megalodon's serrated teeth exactly. But here is where it gets specific. The bite locations matter. On many fossils, the marks cluster around the torso, the tail, and the fins. Megalodon was targeting the areas that disabled movement first. Strike the tail, and the whale cannot swim away. Strike the fins, and it cannot steer. This was calculated. It was a hunting strategy refined over millions of years of evolution, passed down not through learning but through the simple survival of the sharks that did it best. What Megalodon did not regularly hunt says just as much. Evidence for attacks on massive, healthy adult sperm whales is sparse. The prey Megalodon targeted most often skewed toward medium-sized whales, young animals, or injured individuals. A team of researchers analysing fossil sites across North America and Europe noticed the pattern clearly. The biggest, most dangerous prey showed fewer attack marks. The smaller and more vulnerable showed more. That pattern means something. A predator that hunts strategically avoids unnecessary risk. A broken tooth, a deep gash from a panicked whale's tail, an infection from a wound. Any of these could be fatal for an animal that needs to eat constantly to fuel its enormous body. Megalodon ate huge amounts. Estimates suggest it needed to consume roughly 2,000 pounds of food every week just to maintain its size. An injury that kept it from hunting for even a few days created a serious problem. So Megalodon picked its battles. It chose prey it could overwhelm with the least possible risk to itself. That is predator logic. And it is the same logic that makes even lions avoid adult buffalo and focus on calves and weakened adults instead. There is one prey animal, though, that appears in the fossil record over and over alongside Megalodon attack evidence. And this animal did not go quietly. It had weapons of its own, and the scars on Megalodon fossils suggest some encounters left marks on both sides. That animal was not helpless. It was not small. And in some cases, it may have fought back hard enough to make Megalodon reconsider. We will get to it. But first, understand the weapon Megalodon brought to every fight, because nothing in the ocean could match it, and nothing since has come close. There is a number that stops conversations: 40,000 pounds per square inch. That is the estimated bite force of a fully grown Megalodon. Say it out loud and it still does not fully land, so put it next to something real. A great white shark bites with roughly 4,000 pounds of force per square inch. A lion delivers about 1,000 pounds. A human jaw produces around 200 pounds when biting down hard. Megalodon bit with a force 10 times stronger than a great white, 40 times stronger than a lion, 200 times stronger than you. A team of biomechanics researchers ran the calculations using jaw structure fossils, muscle attachment points, and comparisons with living sharks. They built a computer model of Megalodon's jaw and ran simulations of a full bite. The results published in their study pointed to a force range between 35,000 and 41,000 pounds per square inch, depending on the size of the individual shark. Every other predator ever measured, living or extinct, fell far below that range. Tyrannosaurus rex, long celebrated as the hardest biter in history, reached somewhere around 12,000 pounds per square inch. Megalodon nearly tripled it. What that force meant in practice is hard to picture, so think about it this way. A whale rib bone is dense, thick, and built to absorb enormous pressure from deep ocean dives. It is one of the toughest structural elements in any large animal. Megalodon bit through whale rib cage the way you bite through a cracker. Clean, fast, complete. The teeth amplified the force even further. Those serrated edges did not just concentrate pressure at the tip the way a spike would. They distributed it along each ridge, so the entire edge cut at once. The result was a bite that did not just wound. It removed material. Flesh, blubber, bone. All of it came away in a single motion. Paleontologists have found whale vertebrae with Megalodon tooth fragments still embedded inside the bone, broken off mid-bite, suggesting attack so forceful that the shark's own teeth occasionally snapped under the pressure. Now here is the part that most people miss. A bite that powerful requires an equally powerful delivery system. Megalodon's jaw was reinforced with dense cartilage, and a muscle structure built specifically to generate that force rapidly. The bite was fast. A slow bite, no matter how strong, gives prey time to react. Megalodon closed its jaw at speeds researchers estimate were comparable to modern great whites, meaning a creature 3 times the size achieved similar strike speeds. The prey animal felt almost nothing before it was already over. That combination of size, speed, and force made Megalodon the most mechanically devastating biter the planet has ever produced. A weapon built not just to kill, but to end encounters before they became fights. Yet even that weapon had limits. Even a jaw that strong needed to connect, and the ocean, it turns out, held animals that were very good at making sure it did not. Megalodon did not chase. Chasing costs energy, creates noise, and gives prey time to react. Megalodon waited, positioned itself, and struck from below in a single explosive movement that gave its target almost no time to respond. Scientists pieced this together from the wound patterns on fossilized whale bones. The attack marks concentrated on the underside of the body, on the soft belly and the lower sections of the torso. That positioning is the signature of an ambush predator that approaches from beneath. Megalodon would cruise in deep water beneath a whale, sometimes matching its speed, invisible from above, and then drive upward at full force. For a whale at the surface, this attack came from the worst possible direction. Looking down into dark water is hard. Detecting motion from directly below is nearly impossible when sunlight blinds the view from above. Megalodon used that blind spot deliberately. Every part of its behavior during a hunt pointed to an animal that understood how to exploit it. Modern great white sharks use the same tactic on seals. They hover in the dark zone below the surface, spot a seal silhouetted against the light, and rocket upward. Great whites have been filmed leaping completely out of the water during these strikes. Now scale that up. A 50-ton animal driving upward from 60 feet below a whale does not just breach the surface. It delivers a collision with the force of a car crash, and that collision is the point. The strike alone can stun or kill before the bite even lands. The approach itself was silent. Megalodon's body, like all sharks, was covered in tiny structures called denticles. These are essentially microscopic teeth covering the skin, and they reduce drag and turbulence as the shark moves through water. A shark that large moving at hunting speed would leave almost no wake, no trail of bubbles, and almost no sound that a whale's hearing system could pick up until the shark was already close. Once Megalodon entered its strike range, usually within about 30 feet of the target, it was too late for most prey. The distance closed in under 2 seconds. The initial strike hit with enough force to fracture bone on contact. The whale did not have time to dive, accelerate, or turn, the hunt was over before it became a struggle. But here is what makes this hunting style so revealing. Ambush predators rely on surprise above everything else. Remove the surprise and the whole system breaks down. Any prey animal that saw Megalodon coming, or that could fight back before the ambush landed, represented a genuine problem. Some could, some did. And the fossil record shows exactly what happened when the ambush failed. Ancient sperm whales were enormous. The species that lived alongside Megalodon were bigger than anything swimming in today's oceans. Some reached 50 feet in length, and unlike modern sperm whales, they carried teeth in both jaws, upper and lower, long, thick, conical teeth designed for gripping and tearing rather than just holding. These were animals built to bite back. Paleontologists found their bones scattered across fossil sites in Peru, Chile, South Africa, and Australia, often in the same layers of sediment as Megalodon teeth. The overlap in time and location was too consistent to be coincidence. These two animals shared the same ocean, the same coastlines, and almost certainly the same hunting grounds. The whale bones tell one part of the story. Many show the classic Megalodon attack signature. Deep parallel gouges, sections of rib sheared off, strike marks aimed at disabling the tail and lower body. Megalodon hunted these whales. That part is clear. What is less talked about is the other part. Some Megalodon fossils carry damage that points in the opposite direction. Healed fractures along the jaw, deep scoring marks on cartilage fragments, evidence of strikes from large, powerful objects that hit Megalodon hard enough to leave permanent marks in its own body. A team studying South American fossil sites documented jaw fragments from Megalodon individuals that showed damage consistent with impact trauma. The damage had healed over, meaning the shark survived the encounter, but something had struck it with serious force. The most likely source, given what else existed in those waters, was a large whale defending itself or retaliating. A 50-foot sperm whale in full panic swinging its tail could deliver a strike measured in tons of force. Its jaw, lined with teeth 8 inches long, could close on a shark's body and cause severe damage. These were animals that, when cornered, became weapons. Megalodon likely knew this on some level that was not conscious thought but pure instinct. The fossil record suggests younger, smaller whale individuals showed far more attack evidence than healthy, full-grown adults. Megalodon preferred to strike targets it could overwhelm before the fight began. The big adults, the ones with full size and functioning defensive tools, appeared far less often as victims. That behavioural pattern, that selection pressure towards safer prey, is one of the clearest signals that Megalodon factored in the risk of a fight. It hunted the whales it could take cleanly and left the ones that might fight back. But ancient sperm whales were prey animals, even if dangerous ones. The truly unsettling answer to what Megalodon feared comes from a creature that was something else entirely. A predator. One that hunted whales for the same reasons Megalodon did, and that may have looked at Megalodon the same way Megalodon looked at everything else. Not every hunt ended with a dead whale. Some ended with a wounded shark and a whale that swam away. The fossil record is quiet about these moments, but it is not silent. The clearest evidence comes from whale bones that show Megalodon tooth marks followed by healing. A whale bone that carries deep gouges and then shows smooth bone regrowth layered over those gouges means the animal survived the attack. It kept living long enough for its body to repair the damage. That whale escaped. The hunt failed. Scientists have catalogued dozens of these cases across fossil sites on multiple continents. Some bones show single strikes that missed the vital areas. Others show multiple marks from what appears to be a prolonged struggle, suggesting the whale resisted for long enough that Megalodon either gave up or was driven off. One particularly striking specimen, pulled from Peruvian sediment, showed tooth marks from at least 2 different attack angles on the same bone, with partial healing between them. The whale survived a first attack and then survived a second one on a different day. Megalodon failed, more than once, against the same animal. What drives a predator to abandon an attack? Pain is one answer. A whale tail striking a shark across the snout or gills can cause enough damage to end a hunt. Sharks are sensitive around the head, particularly around the ampullae of Lorenzini, which are the tiny electrosensory organs clustered around their snout. A heavy impact to that area disrupts the shark's ability to sense its environment and causes immediate disorientation. Even Megalodon, with all its mass, was vulnerable to a precisely placed strike. Exhaustion is another factor. A whale that refused to go down quickly could draw out a hunt long enough to cost Megalodon more energy than the meal was worth. This is a real calculation that all large predators make on an instinctive level. Lions break off charges when prey proves faster than expected. Crocodiles release prey that fights too hard in shallow water. Megalodon almost certainly did the same, and then there is group behaviour. Some scientists have suggested that ancient dolphins and smaller whales may have mobbed Megalodon during attacks on their own kind. Modern orcapods do this with great white sharks, driving them off feeding sites through coordinated pressure. If ancient species use similar tactics, a Megalodon in the middle of a difficult hunt could have found itself surrounded by aggressive, fast-moving animals striking from multiple directions. Failed hunts meant a hungry shark. A hungry shark took more risks on its next attempt, and sometimes those risks led somewhere the shark should have avoided. What came next in the ocean's lineup of ancient threats had nothing to do with size or teeth. It had to do with numbers, speed, and something Megalodon may have had no defense against at all. Modern orcas are sometimes called killer whales, but they are actually dolphins, the largest dolphins alive. They hunt in coordinated family groups, communicate during attacks, rotate roles, and have been documented driving great white sharks completely out of entire ocean regions. A single orca does not threaten a great white. A pod of 8 does. Now go back to Megalodon's time. The ancient oceans were full of dolphin relatives, and several of them were significantly larger and more aggressive than anything alive today. One group, commonly called ancient large-toothed dolphins by researchers, reached lengths of 15 to 20 feet and carried teeth designed for attacking large prey. These were animals built to fight things bigger than themselves. Whether these ancient dolphins hunted in coordinated packs the way modern orcas do remains a subject of debate among researchers. The fossil record does not preserve behaviour directly. But several lines of evidence point in that direction. Multiple individuals of these species appear together in fossil sites, suggesting social grouping. Their teeth were built for tearing, not just grabbing fish, and the prey animals of that era showed attack patterns from multiple smaller animals, in addition to single large predators. Here is why that matters for Megalodon specifically. A 60-foot shark is nearly unstoppable in a one-on-one fight. A group of 20-foot predators attacking simultaneously from different directions is a different problem entirely. Each individual strike may do limited damage, but a shark trying to respond to attacks from 6 directions at once cannot protect all of them. Wounds accumulate, blood enters the water, and triggers further aggression in the attackers. Modern great white sharks avoid orcapods with behaviour that researchers describe as active flight. They do not swim away casually. They leave, fast, and they do not return to that area for months, sometimes a full year. The avoidance is total and immediate the moment they detect the orca's presence through sound. If ancient large dolphins behave similarly toward Megalodon, the implications are significant. A Megalodon that learned through painful experience to avoid areas where these pack hunters gathered would shape its entire territory around that avoidance. Certain coastlines, certain feeding grounds, entire stretches of ocean potentially ceded to smaller animals that hunted together. And pack hunters were not the strangest threat waiting in those ancient waters. Something else shared Megalodon's coastlines, something ancient and heavily armoured, and it was completely different from any fish or whale. It had been terrorising oceans since long before Megalodon existed, and it was still there, still enormous, and still dangerous. Millions of years before Megalodon, crocodilians entered the sea. Not the river crocodiles of today, but massive ocean-going relatives that grew to lengths of 30 feet or more and hunted in open water. By the time Megalodon ruled the ancient oceans, some of these creatures were still present. Enormous, heavily armoured, capable of bursts of speed that seem impossible for their body type, and equipped with a bite force that came close to matching even Megalodon in terms of structural damage to bone. One group of ancient sea crocodilians, which researchers sometimes refer to simply as the Great Sea Crocs, disappeared well before Megalodon's peak period, but others persisted much longer. The overlap between certain large crocodilian species and Megalodon is documented in fossil sites across what is now the Caribbean and along parts of the ancient Pacific coastline. These were not small animals occupying a different ecological space. They were large apex predators competing for some of the same prey. A 30-foot crocodilian in open ocean water is a different animal from anything you picture when you think of crocodiles. The ocean-going varieties had streamlined bodies, paddle-like limbs, and potentially tail fins adapted for sustained swimming. They could not simply be outrun by retreating to deep water, because these animals were capable open water hunters. Their armour is the key detail. Crocodilian skin, even on modern river species, is reinforced with bony plates called osteoderms embedded directly into the hide. These plates make the animal remarkably resistant to puncture from the sides and back. A shark biting down on the armoured back of a large crocodilian encounters a surface closer to biting a car door than biting flesh. The teeth can scratch it. Penetrating it deeply enough to cause serious injury is another matter. For Megalodon, with its enormous bite force, the armour was not impenetrable, but it created a problem. A clean, disabling first strike, which was the foundation of Megalodon's entire hunting method, became much harder to deliver against an animal whose most exposed areas were also the most dangerous to approach. A crocodilian's head is low, fast, and capable of spinning and biting in almost any direction. Getting close enough to deliver a disabling strike meant entering the range of an animal that could strike back faster than Megalodon could reposition. Whether Megalodon actively hunted these giant crocodilians, avoided them, or simply ignored them when possible is something the fossil record does not fully resolve. What it does show is that both animals occupied the same waters during the same periods, and both were capable of causing serious injury to the other. Two apex predators in the same coastal waters means one thing. At some point they ran into each other, and the one who blinked first reveals something about the real hierarchy of that ancient ocean. Sharks are generally solitary. They do not form family groups. They do not cooperate. A shark that encounters another shark of the same species faces a simple calculation: fight, avoid, or ignore. For most shark species, avoidance is the most common outcome when both animals are healthy and roughly equal in size. Megalodon almost certainly followed the same pattern, but the stakes were different. Two megalodons meeting in the same coastal feeding area were two 60-foot apex predators, with the strongest bites in biological history competing for limited prey. If one drove the other away, the winner kept the hunting ground. If neither backed down, the fight would be catastrophic for both. There is fossilized evidence suggesting cannibalism in megalodon populations. Some juvenile megalodon teeth have been found with bite marks that match the size and pattern of adult megalodon jaws. Adult megalodons may have eaten their own young. This is not unique to megalodon. Many shark species practice what scientists call intrauterine cannibalism, where the strongest embryos in the womb consume the others before birth. Sand tiger sharks do this today. The largest embryo survives by eating its siblings. For juvenile megalodons outside the womb, the threat from adults of their own species was real enough that the young animals appear to have used separate areas from adults. Fossil sites in North Carolina, Panama, and South Africa show clusters of juvenile megalodon teeth in shallow coastal zones that contain very few adult-sized teeth. The adults stayed in deeper water closer to their whale prey. The juveniles stayed in shallower water away from the adults. That spatial separation suggests juveniles were actively avoiding adults. The shallow nursery areas offered them something adults could not easily access: a buffer zone. If an adult ventured into those shallows, its massive body became a liability rather than an advantage. It could not maneuver as effectively in tight, shallow water. The juvenile could escape through routes the adult could not follow. So even within its own species, Megalodon navigated a world where other megalodons represented genuine danger. The young avoided the old. Smaller individuals likely avoided larger ones. Encounters between well-matched adults in contested feeding grounds probably ended in retreat rather than combat whenever possible, because a serious wound in a world without medicine meant a slow death from infection. The ocean Megalodon lived in was layered with threats, even from its own kind. But the most dangerous threat of all was approaching from a direction no fossil had prepared researchers to expect. It was not a rival shark. It was something that hunted exactly the same prey, in exactly the same way, and may have been willing to fight Megalodon directly for the right to do it. A baby Megalodon was still a shark the size of a human adult. At birth, juveniles measured somewhere around 6 to 7 feet in length, based on the smallest fossilized teeth scientists have connected to the species. 6 feet of shark sounds impressive until you remember what else was living in those ancient oceans. For the first years of its life, a young Megalodon was prey. Its teeth were too small to take down a whale. Its body lacked the mass to withstand a strike from a large marine mammal. Its jaw force, while already stronger than most living predators, was nowhere near the devastating weapon it would become at full size. The juvenile was a mid-tier predator in a world built for animals much larger than itself. The fossil record preserves the evidence of this vulnerability. Scientists studying Megalodon nursery sites found that juvenile teeth cluster in areas where small fish and marine reptile remains also appear frequently. Young Megalodons were eating things proportional to their actual size: medium fish, small marine mammals, sea turtles. They were filling the same ecological role as a large modern shark fills today. And like any mid-sized predator, they were targeted. The same ancient large dolphins that may have threatened adult megalodons were perfectly capable of killing a juvenile. A pack of 15-foot predatory dolphins attacking a 7-foot shark would end quickly and badly for the shark. Juveniles needed to hide, scatter, and avoid open water encounters that gave larger group hunters the space to coordinate. Large ocean-going crocodilians presented another threat. A 30-foot armoured predator with a fast strike and powerful jaws could take a juvenile megalodon without the kind of difficulty it would face against a full adult. The armoured skin that made adult crocodilians complicated prey for Megalodon became an offensive advantage against smaller, weaker attackers. Even large, bony fish, some of which reached impressive sizes in ancient oceans, posed a threat to the smallest juvenile megalodons. The ocean did not give size advantages to animals that had not yet grown into them. This is what makes Megalodon's nursery behaviour so important. The shallow coastal areas where juveniles gathered were a survival adaptation. The water was warm, which sharks prefer. The prey was abundant and manageable, and crucially, the depth was shallow enough to exclude most of the large, dangerous predators that dominated open water. A juvenile megalodon in the right nursery had a chance. A juvenile caught in open water did not. But the nurseries themselves were not perfectly safe. Something else was drawn to those same shallow coasts for entirely different reasons, and it was about to make those nurseries much more dangerous. The nursery sites were real places. Researchers have identified them from fossil evidence across multiple continents. The coastal shallows of what is now South Carolina, the warm shallow bays along ancient Panama, stretches of North African coastline where sediment from millions of years ago still holds juvenile megalodon teeth by the hundreds. These areas shared specific features: warm water between 75 and 85 degrees Fahrenheit, shallow depth, rarely more than 60 feet, abundant small prey, and geographic features like barrier reefs, estuaries, or submerged ridges that created partially enclosed spaces where the open ocean's largest predators could not easily enter. Scientists recognize this pattern because modern sharks use the same strategy. Lemon sharks, tiger sharks, and great whites all maintain nursery zones in specific shallow coastal areas. The behaviour is ancient and consistent across species. Shallow water protects young sharks from the open ocean and its larger threats. But shallow coastal areas in Megalodon's time were not empty. Several species of large ancient rays occupied those environments. Some reached widths of over 15 feet. While rays are not predators of sharks, they are huge, unpredictable, and capable of delivering serious defensive strikes with their tails. A juvenile megalodon harassing a giant ray for food could trigger a defensive response powerful enough to injure it. More significantly, shallow coastal zones were home to large ambush predators that specialized in exactly those environments. Certain ancient eel-like fish grew to lengths of 15 feet and used the seafloor of shallow bays to launch surprise attacks from below, which is almost the exact method Megalodon itself used in deeper water. A juvenile megalodon swimming near the seafloor of a coastal bay was entering the hunting zone of an animal that used its own species' tactics against it. Ancient giant sea snakes are documented in fossils from the same periods and regions as Megalodon nursery sites. Some of these reached lengths of 50 feet. They were constrictors or ambush predators depending on species, and while a full-grown megalodon would have been beyond their capabilities, a juvenile in shallow, murky water presented a different calculation. The nurseries were safer than open ocean. They were not safe. Every threat in those shallow waters was shaping juvenile Megalodon into something that survived by being cautious, fast, and selective. The ones that made it through those early years grew into something the ocean had never produced before, something that climbed from vulnerability to the very top. What those survivors encountered on the way up is where the story gets darker. Growing from a 6-foot juvenile to a 60-foot adult takes time. Sharks grow slowly relative to their lifespan. Researchers estimate Megalodon may have lived for decades, possibly reaching ages between 40 and 100 years, with the largest individuals representing the oldest survivors of a brutally selective process. Every year of growth meant a young Megalodon moving up through a hierarchy where it was not yet at the top. During the juvenile and subadult years, Megalodon occupied a competitive space crowded with other large predators. Ancient relatives of modern mako sharks were present in the same oceans, and they were fast. Makos today are among the fastest sharks alive, capable of reaching speeds of 40 miles per hour in short bursts. Ancient mako relatives in Megalodon's era were similarly built. A subadult Megalodon at 15 feet was not faster than a mako. It was slower, heavier, and still developing the mass that would eventually make speed less important. Speed matters when competing for the same prey. A mako could intercept a fish school before a young Megalodon reached it. A group of ancient large dolphins could herd prey away from an approaching shark before the shark got close enough to strike. The young Megalodon, not yet large enough to overpower anything it wanted and not fast enough to catch everything it needed, had to be opportunistic. It ate what it could reach, scavenged when possible, and avoided confrontations with faster, more agile animals. Fossil evidence from juvenile Megalodon sites shows tooth marks on prey that suggest desperate feeding, multiple bite attempts on the same carcass, bite angles that indicate feeding alongside other predators rather than alone on a fresh kill. Young Megalodons were fighting for scraps at times, sharing carcasses with animals they could not yet dominate. Competition for food during growth years also created direct conflict with other subadult predators. Ancient snaggletooth sharks, which were large and aggressive species in their own right, occupied similar size ranges during Megalodon's juvenile period. Fossil sites sometimes contain teeth from both species in the same sediment layers, with bite damage on bones that appears to come from multiple predator types. These animals were not cooperating. They were competing at the same feeding sites. A subadult Megalodon that won enough feeding competitions survived to the next growth stage, one that consistently lost went hungry. A hungry growing shark takes risks. Risks led to injuries. Injuries in a world without treatment led to death. The ones who survived grew past the competition. Once Megalodon crossed a certain size threshold, the equation flipped. Other predators began avoiding it rather than competing with it. The ocean around a full-grown Megalodon went quiet, but one predator never went quiet. One predator grew alongside Megalodon, matched its prey preferences, and arrived at full size with the tools to challenge even the greatest shark that ever lived. Most people picture Megalodon sitting alone at the very top of the food chain, undisputed, unchallenged. The reality of ancient ocean ecosystems was considerably messier. Food chains in complex ecosystems are rarely straight lines. They are webs. Multiple apex predators exist simultaneously, competing for prey, avoiding each other, and occasionally threatening each other directly. Modern oceans have great white sharks, orcas, and large sperm whales all operating as apex predators in overlapping territories. None of them is simply the top of a clean single line. They intersect, compete, and sometimes attack each other. Megalodon's oceans were the same way, except every predator was larger. The ecological web around Megalodon included ancient sperm whales with teeth in both jaws, giant predatory dolphins hunting in groups, large ocean-going crocodilians, and at least one other predator that researchers have identified as a direct competitor. Here is what the fossil record actually shows. In many of the regions where Megalodon lived, there is no evidence that it systematically dominated all other large predators. Instead, the evidence shows geographic separation, with Megalodon concentrated in certain areas and other large predators concentrated in others, and overlapping zones where multiple species competed for the same resources. This is the signature of ecological competition, not unchallenged dominance. An animal that truly had no competitors would not show geographic partitioning with other species. It would be everywhere its prey was. Megalodon was not everywhere. Certain ancient whale feeding grounds show almost no Megalodon evidence despite being rich in whale fossils. Other sites that should have contained Megalodon based on available prey show sparse evidence of the shark's presence. The gaps suggest avoidance patterns, areas where something about the environment or the other predators present made Megalodon stay away. A top predator that avoids certain areas is a predator responding to something in those areas. Whether that something was competition, a specific dangerous species, or environmental factors the fossil record cannot preserve, the avoidance was real. Understanding what drove that avoidance means understanding the single most dangerous predator that shared Megalodon's ocean. An animal whose fossil record tells a story that researchers are still debating, because the implications are extraordinary. Its teeth were longer than Megalodon's, its skull was bigger, and it ate exactly the same prey. In 2008, a team of paleontologists working in the Pisco Desert in Peru pulled a skull fragment out of ancient marine sediment. The skull was enormous. The teeth embedded in it were the largest functional teeth of any animal ever found in the fossil record. Each one reached 14 inches in length and 3 inches in diameter. They were present in both the upper and lower jaw, every single one built for gripping and tearing flesh from very large prey. The animal was a sperm whale, but a predatory one. Modern sperm whales have teeth only in the lower jaw, and they primarily eat giant squid. This ancient relative had a full set of massive teeth in both jaws and a skull structure that pointed toward attacking large marine mammals as its primary food source. Researchers gave it a name meaning god of the sea and the Livyatan of ancient scripture. It was, in the bluntest possible terms, a whale that ate other whales. Full-size estimates for this creature place it between 40 and 57 feet in length, comparable to Megalodon. Its skull alone reached 10 feet in length. The jaw, when fully open, created a gap wide enough to engulf an animal the size of a small car. The temporal muscles powering that jaw were among the largest of any animal whose fossils we have found. What makes this directly relevant to Megalodon is the geography and timing. The Peruvian fossil site where this whale was discovered dates to roughly 12 to 13 million years ago. Megalodon teeth recovered from the same region date to the same period. These two animals were alive at the same time, in the same ocean, eating the same prey. A predatory whale of that size and equipped with those teeth was not prey for Megalodon in any simple sense. A 50-foot animal with the largest functional teeth in the history of life on Earth, built for attacking large marine mammals, could cause catastrophic injury to any other predator that engaged it directly. The teeth alone tell the story. 14-inch conical teeth with tremendous jaw force closing on a shark, even a 60-foot one, would drive straight through cartilage. Sharks lack the bone structure to resist puncture the way armoured animals can. A single bite from this whale landing on Megalodon's torso could be fatal. Two apex predators, same ocean, same prey, the same coastlines. Something had to give, and the fossil record may actually contain the answer. Fossil sites do not lie about timing. When two species appear in the same geological layer, in the same region, separated only by feet of sediment, they were alive simultaneously. The Pisco Formation in Peru is one of the most studied marine fossil sites in the world, and it contains both Megalodon teeth and remains of the giant predatory whale in numbers that rule out coincidence. Scientists have catalogued the co-occurrence across multiple sites. Southern Spain has produced specimens of both from the same ancient seabeds. South Africa shows the same pattern. Parts of North America along the ancient Atlantic coastline yield teeth from both predators in layers dated to the same geological window. The overlap was not brief. Fossil evidence suggests both species shared ocean territory for millions of years. Millions of years of coexistence between two apex predators hunting the same prey in the same water means millions of years of competition. In modern ecology, when two apex predators of similar size occupy the same territory and eat the same food, the result is rarely peaceful coexistence. One outcompetes the other, they divide territory, or they occasionally attack each other directly. Whale bones from the Pisco Formation show attack damage from multiple sources. Some marks match Megalodon's teeth, wide, flat, serrated gouges. Other marks on the same bones are narrower, deeper, and rounder, consistent with the conical teeth of the large predatory whale. In several cases, both types of marks appear on the same skeleton. Both predators fed on the same individual whale. They were operating in the same hunting grounds, going after the same kills. Whether they fed simultaneously or at different times on the same carcass, the record cannot fully determine. But it does show something even more remarkable. At least one specimen of the predatory whale's bone material carries damage consistent with a Megalodon bite, and at least one set of Megalodon jaw fragments from that region shows healed damage that researchers have attributed to a strike from a very large toothed cetacean. These two animals encountered each other, they caused each other damage, and both survived at least some of those encounters. A predator that sustains damage in a conflict and then heals from it carries that information forward. Its behavior after a painful encounter changes. Its avoidance of the specific stimulus that caused the pain increases. A Megalodon that survived a direct strike from the predatory whale and spent months healing from the wound would carry a measurable behavioral response to that whale for the rest of its life. What happened when those encounters escalated rather than ended in retreat is a question the fossil record only partially answers. But the partial answer is extraordinary. Scientists have debated this question formally, and the honest answer is that the fossil record does not hand either animal a clean victory. What it does reveal is a more nuanced and disturbing picture. Both animals could win, depending on circumstances, and both animals could lose. Start with the size comparison. Full-size Megalodon at 60 feet outweighs the predatory whale at most size estimates. Mass matters in direct combat because it determines momentum and the force of a collision. A Megalodon driving into a whale from below at full speed delivers an impact the whale cannot simply absorb. But the whale had a critical advantage that mass alone cannot overcome. It was a mammal. Mammals have thicker, denser tissue in the head and upper body. They have ribs built to withstand enormous pressure. And the predatory whale specifically had a forehead structure called a melon, which is a dense mass of fatty tissue that also functions as a battering ram in sperm whale species. A head-on collision between a whale's forehead and a shark's body is damaging to the shark even when the shark is larger. The teeth comparison shifts things further. Megalodon's teeth were wide, flat and serrated, ideal for removing large sections of flesh from a body. The whale's teeth were conical, thick and deep piercing, ideal for gripping and holding an animal that tries to pull away. If the whale bit first and held on, Megalodon could not simply swim away from 14-inch teeth driven by jaw muscles the size of car engines. Researchers studying the healed jaw damage on Megalodon specimens from Peru note that the injury pattern suggests strikes to the head and jaw region, which is precisely where the whale's teeth would land if it struck defensively at an attacking shark targeting its flank. The shark went for the side. The whale turned and bit the shark's head. The shark survived but carried the damage. That sequence, repeated across millions of years between these two species, likely produced an equilibrium. Megalodon avoided direct confrontation with full-grown predatory whale adults. The whale, similarly, may have given young or smaller megalodons a wide berth to avoid the catastrophic bite force those sharks could deliver. Two predators that learned to respect each other through repeated painful experience. An ocean shared through mutual deterrence rather than clear dominance. But deterrence has limits, and when the ocean itself began to change, that balance broke apart in ways neither animal was equipped to survive. Cooperation in predators is one of the most dangerous evolutionary developments in the history of life. A single predator, no matter how powerful, has limits. A group of predators that coordinate their attacks, divide roles, and share information has no equivalent individual limit. The whole becomes more lethal than the sum of its parts. Modern orcas demonstrate this in ways that still shock researchers. A pod of orcas can kill a blue whale, the largest animal on Earth, through sustained group pressure. Individual orcas are not physically capable of this. Together, they are. They take turns ramming the whale's body, forcing it to the surface, preventing it from diving, exhausting it until it can no longer resist. The strategy requires communication, role assignment, and patience. It is a form of coordinated behaviour that goes far beyond simple pack hunting. In Megalodon's era, the ancestors of modern orcas were developing exactly these capabilities. Fossil evidence of ancient dolphin species related to modern orcas shows the same social bone structure and brain development patterns that underlie cooperative hunting today. These animals were becoming smarter, more coordinated, and more dangerous to anything they decided to target as a group. A single ancient orca relative at 15 to 20 feet presented no physical threat to Megalodon. But a coordinated group of 6 to 10 such animals changed the calculation entirely. They could not overpower Megalodon in a direct collision. They did not need to. Cooperative hunting against a large solitary predator works through harassment, redirection, and exploiting weak points. Strike the gill area repeatedly. Force the shark to spin in multiple directions at once. Drive it towards shallow water where its size becomes a liability. Every spin a Megalodon made to address one attacker exposed a different part of its body to another. The group did not need to deliver a killing blow. They needed to exhaust the shark, open wounds through repeated smaller strikes, and wait. Blood loss and exhaustion do the rest. Scientists tracking modern great white shark behaviour near orca pods found that a single orca kill of a great white causes all other great whites in the area to leave for months. They detect the chemical signals of a dead shark in the water and respond with complete avoidance of the territory. If ancient cooperative hunters killed even one Megalodon in a group attack, the surviving Megalodons in that region would have registered the threat and changed their behaviour. Entire coastal areas could have become avoided zones for Megalodon, not because of a single powerful rival, but because of organised groups that had figured out how to neutralise the most powerful predator alive. Megalodon could not fight a strategy. It could only respond to individual threats, one at a time, and the ocean was developing threats that worked precisely by never coming one at a time. What happened next pushed all of this toward a point of no return. The ocean itself was about to change in ways that no predator, regardless of size or power, could fight or outswim. The ocean is not a single temperature. It is layered, regional, and constantly shifting across geological time. Warm currents carry prey, cold currents push it away. A predator built around specific temperature ranges lives and dies by what the water does over thousands of years. Megalodon preferred warm coastal water. Every major fossil site, every nursery zone, every high concentration deposit of Megalodon teeth clusters in regions that ancient geological data confirms were warm during the periods Megalodon was most active. The shark followed the heat the way modern animals follow seasonal migration routes. Warm water meant abundant whale populations. Whale populations meant food. The equation was simple and stable for millions of years. Then it stopped being stable. Around 3.5 million years ago, Earth entered a prolonged cooling period. Glaciers expanded across the northern and southern poles. Ocean temperatures dropped globally. The warm coastal zones that Megalodon depended on began shrinking. Currents that had reliably carried warm water along certain coastlines shifted, redirected by the changing geography of ice sheets pressing down on the poles. The change was slow by human standards, thousands of years. But for a species that had calibrated its entire existence around specific conditions, even a gradual temperature drop had cascading effects. Whale populations that lived in warm water moved with the warmth, pushing into waters Megalodon could not comfortably follow. Cold water does not just make a shark uncomfortable, it slows its metabolism, reduces its hunting efficiency, and makes the enormous calorie demands of a 60-foot body even harder to meet. A team of researchers studying oxygen isotope ratios preserved in ancient fossils from this period found direct evidence of the temperature shift in the regions where megalodon tooth deposits thin out and eventually disappear. The pattern was consistent. As temperatures dropped, megalodon's presence in the fossil record faded. The shark tracked the warm water as long as it could, retreating toward equatorial regions where warmth persisted longer. But equatorial retreat meant entering smaller territory. Smaller territory meant higher competition. Multiple megalodon individuals squeezed into shrinking warm zones competed harder for the same dwindling whale populations. And the whale populations were facing their own crisis entirely. The cold was coming for everything megalodon needed, and something even more targeted was already dismantling its food supply from a completely different angle. Megalodon needed roughly 2,000 pounds of food every week. That is not a flexible number. A shark that size burns calories at a rate its body cannot negotiate. Go too long without that intake, and the body begins consuming itself. Organ function degrades, and the animal dies slowly from the inside out. 2,000 pounds per week, every week, for decades. That demand required a whale population large enough to sustain repeated hunting by multiple megalodon individuals across vast ocean territories. For millions of years, the whale populations were large enough. Then the same cooling event that shrank megalodon's warm water habitat began destroying the marine ecosystem that whales depended on. Plankton is the base of the ocean food chain. Small fish eat plankton, larger fish eat small fish. Baleen whales filter massive quantities of plankton and small fish directly. When ocean temperatures shift dramatically, plankton populations collapse in affected regions. The chain collapses with them. Fish populations crash. Whale feeding grounds disappear. During the cooling period around 3 to 2.5 million years ago, researchers documented a mass extinction event in marine species that wiped out roughly 36% of all marine mammal species, 55% of seabird species, and significant portions of sea turtle and marine fish populations. The event is called the Pliocene marine megafauna extinction, and it gutted the prey base that supported large ocean predators. For megalodon, this was catastrophic in a way that size and strength could not fix. A shark that can overpower any living creature still starves if there is nothing left to overpower. The whales were dying. The species that survived the extinction event were smaller, faster, and often cold water adapted, meaning they moved into the cold zones where megalodon could not effectively hunt. Some researchers have calculated that during this collapse, the available prey biomass for megalodon in its preferred warm coastal zones dropped by as much as 80% within a geologically rapid time frame. 80% less food for animals that needed enormous and consistent quantities. The math produces one outcome. Megalodon populations began declining. Individuals that had sustained themselves in specific territories found their prey gone. They moved looking for alternatives and found other megalodon individuals doing the same thing in the remaining viable zones. Competition intensified as resources collapsed. A starving apex predator in a shrinking territory takes risks it would normally avoid. Those risks brought megalodon into contact with competitors it might otherwise have circled around, and one of those competitors had been quietly growing stronger through the entire period megalodon was declining. The fossil record preserves absences as well as presences. When a species should appear in a region based on temperature, prey availability and geography, and it does not appear, that absence is data. Scientists call this a ghost range. The territory an animal should occupy based on ecological modelling, but where evidence of its presence is missing. Megalodon has ghost ranges, significant ones. Several ancient ocean regions that hosted large whale populations during Megalodon's peak period show almost no Megalodon fossil evidence despite preserving whale remains in large quantities. The whales were there, The conditions looked right. Megalodon should have been there. The teeth should be in the sediment. They are not. One of the clearest examples spans parts of the ancient North Atlantic during specific geological windows. Whale fossil density in certain sediment layers is high. Water temperature data reconstructed from those same layers falls within the range Megalodon preferred. Yet Megalodon teeth in those same layers are sparse to absent, while large-toothed whale remains and ancient dolphin fossils appear consistently. The most straightforward interpretation is that Megalodon avoided those areas because something in them made the cost of being there too high. The something that appears consistently in those same layers is evidence of coordinated marine mammal predators, large ancient dolphin species showing the skull and dental morphology associated with group hunting behaviour, present in numbers that suggest established organised populations. A megalodon that entered a territory dominated by coordinated group hunters faced a harassment problem it could not solve through raw power. The shark could not outswim a coordinated group over sustained distances. It could not protect all sides of its body simultaneously against multiple attackers. The most rational response was avoidance, and the fossil record suggests that is exactly what happened. Territorial avoidance by Megalodon means those ghost ranges were chosen absences. The shark knew the cost and stayed out. This kind of learned territorial behaviour is documented in modern great whites. Individual sharks tracked by researchers show consistent avoidance of specific areas after negative encounters. They do not return to locations where they experience serious threat. A 60-foot shark that avoids certain territories is a 60-foot shark making survival calculations. The ocean was becoming full of places Megalodon could not safely go. As the cooling continued, those places expanded, the safe zones shrank. And deep below the surface, in the parts of the ocean Megalodon rarely visited, something ancient and enormous waited in water so dark and cold that even the greatest shark ever to live had very good reasons to stay away. The ocean has layers. The surface layer, warm and lit by sunlight, is where most life concentrates. Below that, the water cools rapidly in a zone called the thermocline. Below the thermocline, the ocean becomes very cold, very dark, and very pressurized. Most large predators operate in the surface layer and the upper part of the middle zone. The deep is a different world entirely. Megalodon was built for warm surface water hunting. Its entire physiology, its hunting method, its dependence on warm water whale prey, all of it concentrated the shark in the upper ocean. But as prey became scarce in surface zones, the question of whether Megalodon could pursue food into deeper water becomes important. The pressure increases in the deep ocean rapidly. At 3,000 feet down, the pressure is roughly 90 times what you feel at the surface. At 6,000 feet, it is nearly 200 times surface pressure. Sharks can handle significant pressure changes, but a shark built for surface hunting and surface temperatures faces increasing physiological stress as it descends past its preferred zone. Megalodon's enormous body mass also created a challenge. Large bodies retain heat well, which is an advantage in cool surface water during a chase. But in the cold deep, where water temperatures drop toward freezing, even retained body heat disperses faster than a massive body can generate it through muscle movement alone. A cold shark is a slow shark. A slow shark in the deep, far from the surface, cannot hunt effectively and cannot escape threats efficiently. The deep ocean also contained prey Megalodon's hunting method could not easily reach. Giant squid, which grew to lengths approaching 60 feet in ancient oceans, lived in the middle and deep zones. They were almost certainly too fast, too maneuverable in three-dimensional space, and too comfortable in cold pressure environments for Megalodon to pursue with any efficiency. Modern sperm whales dive to 3,000 feet or deeper to hunt giant squid. They are physiologically adapted for this in ways Megalodon simply was not. The shark could not follow the food source that survived the Pliocene extinction most successfully, so the deep offered no escape from the resource collapse happening above. Megalodon was locked into a shrinking band of viable ocean, being compressed from below by cold and pressure, and from above by a sky that no longer mattered, because the real pressure was coming from the sides, from competitors filling the same shrinking space. One of those competitors had been patient for millions of years, small at first, faster than anything its size had a right to be, and getting bigger. Giant squid are not passive prey. Modern giant squid, the largest invertebrates on Earth, have been found on sperm whale carcasses with sucker marks raked across the whale's skin that measure 8 inches across. The suckers of a giant squid are lined with sharp, tooth-like structures that cut into flesh as the sucker contracts. A large squid gripping a shark's body does not simply hold on, it tears. Ancient giant squid were larger than modern ones, fossils of their beak structures, which are the only hard parts of a squid body that preserve well, suggest some ancient species reached lengths of 60 feet or more. Their tentacles, lined with cutting suckers, could extend another 20 feet beyond the body. An animal that can reach 80 feet in total length and grip with hooks sharp enough to cut whale skin is a significant threat even to very large predators. Squid operate best in deep, cold, dark water. They are fast, boneless, and able to change direction in ways that rigid-bodied predators like sharks cannot match. A shark attacking a large squid risks getting wrapped in tentacles that begin cutting immediately. The more the shark thrashes to free itself, the deeper the sucker hooks dig in. It is a defensive mechanism that evolution refined over hundreds of millions of years. Megalodon's hunting strategy depended entirely on a single decisive strike. The ambush from below, the explosive approach, the devastating first bite. Against a squid in deep, dark water, this strategy does not transfer cleanly. The target is invisible until close range in the dark. It is not a mammal with predictable surface behavior. It moves in 3 dimensions at high speed, and if the first bite does not end the encounter, the squid wraps, and the shark is suddenly fighting a gripping, cutting machine that cannot be shaken off. The deep dark zones where giant squid thrived were zones where Megalodon's advantages became liabilities. Fossil evidence of Megalodon teeth in deep water sediment layers is extraordinarily rare compared to shallow and mid-depth zones. The shark stayed up. The squid stayed down. But the boundary between those zones was not fixed. As prey in shallow zones disappeared during the Pliocene collapse, that boundary became a question Megalodon had to answer. Go deeper and risk the squid's territory. Stay shallow and starve. For most individuals, staying shallow was the choice, and in those shrinking shallow zones, something far more familiar than giant squid was waiting. Something that wore Megalodon's own hunting strategy back at it, faster, more adaptable and multiplying. Megalodon had extraordinary senses, every shark does. The lateral line system, which is a row of pressure-sensitive cells running along the body from head to tail, detects movement in the water up to 300 feet away. A whale breathing at the surface creates pressure waves that a shark's lateral line reads like a text message. Direction, distance, size. All of it processed before the shark even turns toward the source. The electroreception system adds another layer. The tiny pores clustered around the shark's snout, called the ampullae of Lorenzini, detect the electrical fields generated by the muscle contractions of any living animal. A fish buried under 6 inches of sand still generates electrical signals that a shark cruising above can detect. At hunting range, these electrical sensors give a shark a real-time map of its prey's exact body position, muscle state, and movement pattern. Smell operates over the greatest distances. Sharks can detect blood in parts per million across miles of open ocean. The olfactory system processes water flowing through nasal passages the entire time the shark swims, constantly sampling the chemical signature of its environment. A whale with a fresh wound, broadcasting blood into a current, creates a chemical trail Megalodon could follow for miles. All of these senses are devastatingly effective against large, slow, surface-oriented prey. They evolved alongside whale hunting, and they are optimized for it. But they have specific blind spots that certain threats exploit perfectly. Coordinated group hunters attacking from multiple directions simultaneously overwhelm the lateral line's ability to isolate and respond to a single threat. The system works best when tracking one major source of movement. A dozen animals attacking from 12 directions creates a sensory overload where prioritization fails. The shark responds to the nearest threat and gets hit from behind. High-frequency sound, the kind ancient dolphin relatives used for communication during coordinated hunts, falls outside the range Megalodon's hearing could effectively process. Modern sharks detect low-frequency sound well. High-frequency signals used by dolphin species for echolocation and coordination pass through shark tissue without triggering meaningful sensory response. The dolphins could coordinate their attack vocally, and Megalodon heard nothing. Cold water degrades electroreception range. As temperatures dropped during the Pliocene cooling, Megalodon's electrical sensing became less reliable at longer distances. The precise, early warning detection system that made ambush hunting so effective shortened its range exactly when the shark needed every advantage it could find. The greatest predator's senses were tuned for a world that was disappearing, and the things it could not detect were getting closer. Some threats require no senses to avoid them at all, because by the time any sense registers them, it is already too late. Every large animal carries a biological burden that scales with its size. More body surface means more attachment points for external parasites. More gut volume means more space for internal ones. A 60-foot shark with an immune system evolved for a specific, stable ocean environment faced invisible threats that left no teeth marks in the fossil record, but killed just as surely. Modern large sharks carry significant parasite loads. Parasitic copepods, which are tiny crustaceans that attach to shark skin, gills, and eyes, are found on virtually every species of shark examined by researchers. Some attach to the cornea of the eye and feed on the tissue there, causing progressive vision loss. A great white shark with heavy copepod infestation on both eyes loses the visual precision that makes distance hunting possible. For an ambush predator, degraded vision means missed strikes, means failed hunts, means starvation. Megalodon, scaling up in size, would have carried proportionally larger parasite communities. The gill surfaces of a 60-foot shark are enormous, offering vast attachment area for respiratory parasites that restrict oxygen absorption. A shark breathing less efficiently than its body demands fatigues faster during a hunt, delivers less force to the strike, and requires more recovery time between active swimming periods. Internal parasites cause different problems. Tapeworms and roundworm relatives are found in the intestinal tracts of virtually all large sharks studied in modern populations. In a healthy shark with a reliable food supply, the immune system keeps these populations manageable. In a starving shark, where immune resources are redirected toward basic survival functions, internal parasite populations can explode, damaging intestinal walls, blocking nutrient absorption, and accelerating the starvation process from the inside. Bacterial infections from wounds represent another dimension. A megalodon that survived an encounter with the ancient predatory whale, a failed attack on a large whale that fought back, or an attack from a coordinated dolphin group carried open wounds into an ocean full of bacteria. Shark cartilage has some natural antibacterial properties, but these are not absolute. A deep wound that becomes infected in an animal the size of Megalodon creates a spreading necrotic process that impairs the affected body region over weeks and months. The fossil record cannot show parasites or infections directly, but the biology of large sharks makes their impact on Megalodon populations certain. A species already stressed by food shortage, shrinking territory, and intensified competition carried an increased biological burden from disease and parasitism at exactly the moment it could least afford it. The visible threats left tooth marks in bone. The invisible ones left nothing except absence. And the absences in the fossil record are growing toward one inevitable point. Great white sharks are among the most studied predators on Earth. Decades of tagging, tracking, and direct observation have produced a detailed picture of how they respond to threats, and that picture has direct implications for understanding Megalodon. When a great white detects a killer whale in its area, the behavioural response is extreme and immediate. Researchers tracking tagged great whites near the Farallon Islands off the California coast documented the response in precise detail. The moment a great white detects an orca, sometimes from miles away through sound and chemical signals, it dives deep and leaves the area at maximum sustained speed. It does not circle, it does not investigate, it leaves and does not return for months. The response is so consistent and so dramatic that researchers described it as one of the most complete prey response behaviours ever documented in an apex predator. A great white shark, the apex predator of modern oceans, effectively treats orcas as an existential threat and removes itself from the equation entirely. Now apply that template to Megalodon. Great white sharks are the closest living relatives of Megalodon, with a comparable ecological role. Their behavioural responses to threats are probably the best available model for how Megalodon responded to threats in its own time. If the modern relative of Megalodon treats coordinated group hunters as a stimulus for complete territorial abandonment, the ancient version almost certainly did the same. The ancient dolphin relatives and proto-orca species in Megalodon's era were developing exactly the coordination capabilities that modern orcas use to drive great whites away. As those capabilities improved over evolutionary time, the pressure on Megalodon's territorial range increased. The shark was not learning to fight back against coordination. It was learning to avoid it, exactly the way its modern relative still does. Great whites also avoid areas where they have been injured or experienced serious negative encounters, even without another predator present. Injury location memory is documented in tagged individuals that show long-term avoidance of specific GPS coordinates where they were previously caught or harassed. Megalodon, with a brain structured similarly, almost certainly encoded the same type of location-specific avoidance memory. A Megalodon with this behavioural template, operating in an ocean where group threats were expanding and safe territories were shrinking, was caught in a loop it had no behavioural tools to break. The same instincts that had protected it for millions of years were now compressing its world down to a smaller and smaller space. And into that shrinking space, a new competitor was growing. Faster, more adaptable, more capable of surviving in cold water. A shark that looked almost familiar. The decline was not a single event. It was a convergence of pressures arriving from multiple directions at the same time, each one manageable alone, but combined into something the species could not absorb. The best geological evidence places the beginning of Megalodon's serious decline at around 3.5 million years ago, coinciding almost exactly with the onset of the Pliocene marine megafauna extinction and the global cooling event. This is not coincidence. These events are causally linked, and Megalodon sat at the intersection of all of them. Researchers studying Megalodon tooth density and sediment layers across global fossil sites found a clear pattern. The number of teeth per cubic metre of sediment, which serves as a rough proxy for population density, begins dropping sharply around this period. The decline was steepest in the highest latitudes, the areas furthest from the equator where cooling hit hardest. It was slowest in equatorial and tropical regions where warmth persisted longest. This gradient confirms that temperature was a primary driver. Megalodon populations retreated toward the equator as conditions deteriorated at higher latitudes. The retreat compressed surviving populations into smaller geographic areas. Competition between individuals increased. Prey in those areas faced heavier hunting pressure and began declining faster than natural reproduction could replace them. A team of researchers modelled the collapse using ecological simulation software, inputting the known prey decline rates, temperature change data, and estimated Megalodon population numbers. The model produced a consistent result. Once prey populations dropped below a critical threshold in the remaining warm zones, Megalodon population decline became irreversible. The food supply could not recover fast enough to support the remaining sharks. The sharks consumed what remained and then had nothing left. The model estimated the final collapse occurring between 2.5 and 2 million years ago. Fossil evidence aligns with this window. The last definitive megalodon teeth recovered from sediment date to approximately 3.6 million years ago in some sites, with disputed specimens pushing slightly closer to the present in isolated locations. Every pressure that had built over millions of years arrived at its tipping point simultaneously. Temperature, prey collapse, territorial compression, increased competition, disease burden. All of it converging on a species that had ruled the ocean for 20 million years and could not adapt fast enough to survive a world that had changed around it in every direction at once. The end was coming, but it was not arriving alone. Something was rising to meet it, pushing from below, filling the spaces Megalodon left behind, and that something had spent millions of years learning from the same ocean that was destroying its predecessor. Great white sharks and Megalodon overlapped in time. The fossil record confirms that both species were alive simultaneously for a period that researchers estimate lasted several million years. For most of that overlap, they occupied different ecological niches. Megalodon targeted large whales. Early great whites targeted smaller prey, seals, dolphins, mid-sized fish. The size difference between the two species was enormous enough that direct competition was limited. Then the whale populations collapsed. When the prey base that sustained Megalodon disappeared, the shark needed to shift to smaller prey to survive. Smaller marine mammals, larger fish, mid-sized dolphins. Precisely the prey that great white sharks were already pursuing efficiently. Two shark species converging on the same prey pool creates competition that the more efficient hunter wins. Great white sharks had crucial advantages in this new competition. They were smaller, meaning they required far less food to maintain their bodies. A 20-foot great white needs a fraction of the weekly calorie intake that a 60-foot megalodon required. In a food-scarce environment, the animal that can survive on less wins by simple math. Great whites were also more cold water tolerant. They have a specialized circulatory adaptation called the counter-current heat exchange system that allows them to maintain body temperature in colder water than Megalodon could handle. As warm zones shrank, great whites could follow prey into temperatures that pushed Megalodon's physiological limits. They accessed food sources in cold water that Megalodon could not efficiently reach. And great whites were faster in short bursts, 40 miles per hour versus an estimated 20 miles per hour for a cruising Megalodon. In a competition for the same fast-moving prey, speed matters. A great white could catch prey that Megalodon's slower approach could not reach before the prey evaded. Some researchers have proposed that direct competition from great whites accelerated Megalodon's decline in the period when both species were hunting reduced prey pools simultaneously. The great whites did not attack Megalodon. They simply outcompeted it for the food Megalodon needed to survive. Every seal a great white caught was a calorie Megalodon could not afford to miss. Multiplied across populations and years, that competition created a calorie deficit Megalodon could not close. Smaller, more efficient, more adaptable. The great white was everything Megalodon was not in a world that no longer rewarded being the biggest thing in the ocean. And as Megalodon's population thinned, the dynamic between the two species shifted further in the great white's favour with every passing generation. The last Megalodons were living in a world that the great whites were inheriting, and those final animals faced something more isolating than any physical threat the ocean had ever produced. Picture the last few members of any species. They are not dramatic. There is no final battle. The end of a species looks like scattered individuals separated by vast distances, unable to find each other, consuming the last scraps of a food supply that keeps diminishing. The population thins until the gaps between individuals become too large to bridge, and then there are none. That is almost certainly what the end of Megalodon looked like. The last Megalodon individuals would have been concentrated in the few remaining warm water zones near the equator, where temperature still permitted their physiology to function. They were separated from each other by stretches of ocean that had become too cold to cross efficiently. Reproduction requires proximity. A species spread across isolated warm patches, with cold barriers between them, cannot maintain genetic exchange. The populations fragment, shrink independently, and collapse one by one. Food in those final warm zones was scarce. The whale species that survived the Pliocene extinction had shifted towards smaller, faster, cold-adapted varieties. The slow, fat, warm-water giants that Megalodon had hunted for 20 million years were gone. The survivors were animals built for different conditions, and pursuing them required effort that a starving 60-foot shark could not sustain. Individual megalodons in this final period were almost certainly in physical decline. Parasites unmanaged by a weakened immune system, healed wounds from past encounters limiting mobility, muscle mass reduced by chronic food shortage. A 60-foot shark at reduced health is not the apex predator that dominated warm oceans for millions of years. It is a large, slow, vulnerable animal in a world that has moved on. The coordinated hunters that had been expanding their range and capabilities throughout Megalodon's decline were now the dominant force in the coastal zones where the last warm water pockets persisted. The same group hunting behaviour that had driven Megalodon from territories for millions of years was now present everywhere the shark could survive. There were no safe zones left. A final Megalodon, old and isolated and starving, facing a pod of coordinated hunters in the last warm patch of ocean it could tolerate. That is where 20 million years of dominance ended. Not with a roar. With an ocean that simply left no space for it to exist. The absence that followed is one of the most consequential gaps in the history of life on Earth. Megalodon is gone. But the question of what could challenge it, even theoretically, reveals something important about how the ocean works and what true apex status actually means. Start with the sperm whale. Modern sperm whales reach lengths of 60 feet and carry enormous bulk. Male sperm whales are aggressive and have been documented ramming ships hard enough to sink them. Their teeth, while only in the lower jaw, are each a foot long and backed by a jaw force that crushes giant squid with regularity. A sperm whale in a direct confrontation with a megalodon would absorb tremendous damage from the shark's bite, but it would also deliver catastrophic force through ramming and jaw strikes. The outcome depends on who lands the first disabling blow. The blue whale is the largest animal ever known to exist, reaching 100 feet and weighing close to 200 tons. A blue whale does not fight, it runs. But a cornered blue whale's tail moves water with enough force to shatter a small boat. A direct tail strike on any predator, including Megalodon, would cause severe structural damage. The blue whale wins by being too large to kill efficiently, before delivering enough damage to drive any predator away. Modern orcapods are the most dangerous contenders not as individuals but as groups. As documented by researchers, organised orcapods systematically kill great white sharks in the wild, removing and eating their livers with surgical efficiency. Scaled to Megalodon, a large coordinated orcapod using the same harassment and exhaustion strategy could over time kill even a 60-foot shark. The strategy does not require matching Megalodon's power. It requires outlasting it. The giant squid at full size is a defensive nightmare for any predator that fails to kill it instantly. Wrapping tentacles lined with cutting hooks on a shark the size of Megalodon would not kill it quickly, but 60 feet of tentacle gripping a shark's body, while the sucker hooks tear, creates wounds and restriction that complicate any predator's escape. Every modern contender wins only under specific conditions. None of them wins cleanly in every scenario. That reality tells us something about what Megalodon actually was, an animal that dominated its environment through a specific combination of factors that only work together in specific conditions. Remove those conditions, and the dominance becomes vulnerability. The ocean today is shaped by Megalodon's absence in ways that reach every living thing in it. The standard extinction narrative for Megalodon is gradual. Food supply collapses, temperatures drop, populations thin, and the species fades out over hundreds of thousands of years. That narrative is supported by solid geological evidence, and most researchers accept it as the primary driver. A smaller group of researchers has pushed back on the quiet fade picture, arguing that the fossil evidence, when examined closely, suggests the final stages of Megalodon's decline were more abrupt and potentially more violent than the gradual model implies. Their argument centres on the rate of decline in the final fossil record. In several key sites, Megalodon tooth density in sediment does not thin gradually across a long period. It thins steadily for a stretch and then drops to essentially zero within a relatively narrow geological window. The difference between 1 tooth per cubic metre and 0 teeth per cubic metre in sediment layers can represent as few as 10,000 years of deposition, which in geological terms is extremely fast. A population that was still present in some numbers and then vanished within 10,000 years was not simply running out of food slowly. Something accelerated the final collapse. The candidates are the converging pressures already discussed: prey collapse, temperature drop, competitive exclusion by great whites, and predation pressure from coordinated hunters. But the researchers arguing for a violent end suggest that coordinated hunters played a larger role in the final collapse than the gradual model credits. If organised group hunters had developed sufficient population density and coordination, by the time Megalodon's population was already reduced and fragmented, the remaining isolated individuals would have been vulnerable in ways a healthy, numerous Megalodon population never was. A pod of ancient coordinated predators encountering a lone, food-stressed Megalodon in a shrinking warm zone was encountering an animal that could not fight at full capacity. The final kill was likely not a single dramatic confrontation. It was the systematic elimination of isolated, weakened individuals by populations of smarter, faster, more adaptable animals that had been learning to handle large solitary predators for millions of years. Whether this qualifies as violent depends on the definition. For the last Megalodons, the experience of being hunted by everything their shrinking world contained while starving and isolated feels like a word stronger than quiet. Every predator, regardless of size, follows the same fundamental rules. These rules are not chosen. They are selected by evolution over millions of generations of predators that survived and predators that did not. Rule 1. Avoid unnecessary injury. An injury in the wild, even a minor one, degrades hunting ability, invites infection, and can cascade into death. The most powerful predator alive dies from a wound if the wound prevents hunting long enough. Megalodon followed this rule by selecting prey it could kill efficiently, avoiding prey that could fight back seriously, and retreating from coordinated threats rather than engaging them. Rule 2. Protect the energy budget. Every action costs calories. A hunt that burns more energy than the prey provides is a net loss. A predator that consistently runs a calorie deficit dies. Megalodon's entire body plan, the ambush strategy, the single decisive strike, the preference for slow prey, was built around energy efficiency. The 60-foot body was not just a weapon. It was a machine that needed constant fueling and managed that fueling through behavioural precision. Rule 3. Assess the threat before engaging. Modern apex predators spend considerable time circling potential threats before committing to an attack or a retreat. Great white sharks are documented making multiple passes around prey before striking, gathering sensory information and assessing risk. Megalodon, with its sophisticated sensory system, almost certainly did the same. The ambush strategy required knowing exactly where the prey was and exactly how it was moving before launching the strike. Rule 4. Retreat is not failure. The predator that lives to hunt again wins more than the predator that dies, proving its dominance. Every documented case of Megalodon retreating from difficult prey, every ghost range where the shark avoided dangerous territories, every indication that it selected easier targets when harder ones were available, all of it reflects this rule working correctly. Retreat preserved the animal to hunt another day. These rules did not fail Megalodon. The world changed faster than rules built over 20 million years could adapt to. The rules were correct. The environment they were designed for ceased to exist. What remains is a record of 20 million years of perfect predatory logic applied to a world that eventually became something it could no longer match. And that outcome is not a failure story. It is a story about what it costs to be built for something specific in a universe that does not stay specific for long. Remove the top predator from any ecosystem, and the entire system reorganizes. This is called a trophic cascade, and the effects reach every level of the food chain, down to the smallest organisms. When Megalodon disappeared, the whale populations that had survived the Pliocene extinction suddenly faced a dramatically different pressure environment. The apex predator that had hunted them for 20 million years was gone. Whale populations recovered over subsequent millions of years and diversified into the variety of species we see today. Some researchers argue that the explosive diversity of modern baleen whale species, the blue whale, the humpback, the fin whale, was made possible by the removal of the predation pressure Megalodon imposed. The absence of a 60-foot apex shark also allowed other large predators to expand into ecological space they had previously been excluded from. Great white sharks, freed from the competitive pressure and potential predation risk that Megalodon represented, grew into the dominant large predator role in coastal ocean systems globally. The orca took a similar position in colder waters. Both of these predators became central to the modern ocean structure. Fish populations near coastlines changed dramatically. Megalodon's hunting focused on large marine mammals in specific coastal zones. As the shark maintained those hunting grounds, its presence kept other predators and scavengers at the periphery. With Megalodon gone, mid-sized predators moved into those zones and began structuring the fish communities there in different ways. The modern ocean's fish distribution in warm coastal zones is partly a consequence of who took over after Megalodon left. For humans, the implications are direct. The large whale populations that recovered after Megalodon's extinction became the basis for thousands of years of human whaling. The fish communities that restructured in Megalodon's absence became the fish communities that human civilizations built their coastal economies around. The modern ocean that feeds billions of people is partly a product of a 60-foot shark going extinct 3 million years ago. Megalodon shaped the ocean by living in it for 20 million years. It shaped it again, differently, by leaving. The waters we sail on, the fish we eat, the whale species that still breach the surface of warm oceans today, all of it carries the mark of something that no longer exists. And the question that makes all of this feel closest, the question that connects everything, is the one the fossil record has never fully been able to answer. Fear in animals is not the same as fear in humans. A human feels fear as a conscious experience, the racing heart, the tight chest, the awareness of danger attached to a feeling of dread. Animals below a certain level of brain development do not have that conscious layer. What they have is the functional equivalent, a neural response to threat stimuli that drives avoidance behavior, redirects energy toward escape, and encodes the source of the threat into long-term behavioral memory. Sharks have brains. They are not large by mammal standards, but they are organized in ways that support learning, memory, and behavioral adaptation. Studies on captive lemon sharks showed that they can learn to associate specific stimuli with rewards or threats, and retain those associations for at least a year. They change their behavior based on past experience. That is the functional core of what fear does in any animal. It makes past danger into future avoidance. Megalodon, with a brain structure similar to modern sharks but scaled up, almost certainly had this capacity. The behavioral patterns the fossil record reveals, the prey selection that avoided dangerous targets, the territorial avoidance of areas with coordinated hunters, the retreat from failed hunts, all of it reflects an animal encoding threat information and using it to modify future behavior. That is fear working. Not felt as emotion in the human sense, but performing the same survival function. The more unsettling version of this question is whether Megalodon experienced something like stress over its final generations. As prey collapsed and territories shrank and the ocean became increasingly hostile, did individual megalodons experience the neural equivalent of chronic threat response? Research on modern sharks under resource stress shows elevated stress hormones, changed swimming patterns, and reduced hunting efficiency. A permanently stressed apex predator in an environment of constant pressure is less effective at the behaviour it needs most to survive. The final megalodons may have spent their last years in a state of continuous functional fear, every signal in their environment pointing toward threat and scarcity, every hunt harder than the last, every territory smaller than the one before. 20 million years of the ocean's greatest predator, ending in something that looked, from the inside, like a world closing in from every direction. The teeth are still washing up on beaches today, smooth, heavy, black from mineral absorption, preserved for millions of years in the sediment of ocean floors. A child picks one up and holds something the size of their hand, and somewhere in the ocean 3 miles out, a blue whale surfaces in a sea that is calmer than it was, and quieter, because something enormous left it long ago and never came back.